So many shades and textures of blue. And one of the very interesting coincidences was the coincidence between the piece of art that came in from Eric Rosser here.
Oh, that Eric.
Which is called Chicago Blues, Oil on Canvas. And as you see, it's the present day city of Chicago, Lake Michigan. And then Jonathan Bordo, who's standing over there, sent me an email about a poem he'd written about blue and blue. He hadn't mentioned the word Chicago, but when I opened it up, the word Chicago was all over it. And so was iceberg. And there's a beautiful iceberg like painter, David Marshak, right there. David Marshak isn't here, but he is from Canada.
Good marriage.
So I asked Jonathan if he would read that poem, and
I saw that there was a show with a number of my friends who were showing it blue, and so I said, "Oh, I got to go and see. I got to go to the show. I haven't been here since about a year or so, yeah." And because it was blue, I thought about it, and I said, "Well, I actually have a poem that's all about blue." And so in one of those funny moments I have when I send stuff out or I do something like that, these little freakouts I have, I sent it to Korea. And I just let. I said, well, I think this is about this, and it's all about all about Arctic Monet as in Claude Monet blue, and so that was how I approached it with Korea. I just said it's all about Arctic Monet blue, and she could have written back. I didn't know, was there such a color? I didn't know there's a Monet blue, which is called Arctic Monet blue. That kind of idea. Right? Okay, so for 3 years, I was part of I organized a course with a colleague of mine up in Pangnirtung in eastern Baffin Island, which was between cultural studies and indigenous studies. And we were there kind of, after the mosquitoes had died, and then we had midnight sun, so we could be out in the land, and so it was like one of those totally euphoric things that happened. That one moment in your life, you actually go to the Arctic, and there was still lots of icebergs and things like that. Anyway, I was communicating on the internet with a friend of mine in Chicago, a colleague of mine in Chicago. And, as you know, the Inuit are very, very savvy when it comes to remote communications of all kinds. Any kind of communication system, they're geniuses. So, the communication in the high school in Pangnirtung to Chicago was really, really pretty good. So I was in communication with a colleague of mine in Chicago. And I was just telling him all about the things one talks about it. The Arctic, like midnight sun, icebergs, all that stuff, all that northern things that we're so besotted by. And he was, meanwhile, telling me about, I'm in the middle of a heat wave in Chicago, and I'm building sandcastles with my son on the beach. And so the communication kind of went in that sort of way, right? And at least we shared cold water together, because Lake Michigan is pretty cold. And then later on, I actually came to meet his son. I came to visit Chicago. And a couple of years ago, I just learned that he had died under tragic circumstances. And so the poem really came out of, is a memorial to Gabriel Mitchell. That's my friend Tom Mitchell. So it's called Sandcastles from Pang. Gabriel Mitchell in Memoriam. Messages back and forth from the high school at Pangnirtung, eastern Baffin Island, to Hyde Park in Chicago. Getting to know you, mostly weather reports, checking up on as much as checking in. An exchange mostly of place names, academic boasts, titles, and a metonymic slipstream too thick, so smart with its diction of citations, jokes, in italics, a growing index of big ideas. That's what academics do, right? So, he was on the shore of Lake Michigan, at the bottom of the lakes, facing northward, I assume, never having been to Chicago. unfamiliar with its literal drift. Riding out a heat wave, he said. A sensible idea, I thought, since heat wave plus Chicago. Riot in my mind bite equals building sandcastles with Gabe on a scorcher of a day. July 1997. I offered him icebergs in exchange. I imagined Monet with us zigzagging between ice floes on a perfectly still, cool day, bathed in a continuous bending spectrum of blue, from the surface of the ocean arcing upward into a diaphanous blue sky, stairway into a celestial city, as is often said. Blue had become a verb. The universe was bluing on that day in Billy Edawonget's boat. Monet with us in the blueness in his apron, wearing knee-high rubber boots, not galoshes. On that day he might have invented a new hue of blue, falling between the powdery, loving, and low-hanging blue of Angelico that kisses the earth, and Altdorfer blue, so stark, aloof, dropped from the Imperium outside the world, to run out of oxygen in its descent. The way I felt at too high an altitude living in Alberta. And to think they run the country, it's dated, right? Call it Arctic Monet blue. Between icebergs and sandcastles, at least we shared frigid waters to adjust our sublimes. Of course, I thought of Skyscraper City, scraping the sky, of course, and the sweep of the shoreline palisade presenting such a shiny, scrubbed, ambitious face to the lake, while gating the inner city from spilling its guts into pristine waters. Keep the secret inside, down the Mississippi. I also thought of partnerships. Tom and Gabe, Burnham and Lloyd Wright. Who is whose apprentice now, I wonder? What tools they brought to their trade, the buckets, shovels, trowels, hoses, a boombox perhaps, even, yes, a miter, and I imagine them well equipped for the enterprise at hand. What order of columns for their temple of Nike Apteros, their winged victory atop a shifting tumulus, their acropolis on the beach? Perhaps their edifices nestled in the dunes, slung low, like an early effed-up Frank Lloyd Wright prairie house, hiding in tall grasses without vertical thrust against the grain of the Michigan Avenue parade, of the most ambitious, well-appointed, highly decorated procession of towers in the world. And besides, how could they still be at it, building sandcastles? How to sustain such play in earnest, a continuous seasonal production of joy, beginning in the nursery? How old was Tom? Aren't we chrono buddies? Compañero from the Rive Gauche of Mile High Panthers in the bombing of Cambodia? Seize the time. Our kids, at least some of them these days, come later in life. In our landscape joust, he made me jealous. Tom never left his Freudel blocks behind, the font of photographs he has of all their sand d'oeuvre, past and will be in a cabinet for all of us to marvel. Never there, a witness to their frolics. From his words, I still see Tom and Gabe, scoop by scoop, on the beach, at work together. Unpretentious and brave, sandcastles begin and end as ruins. I was not aware, on that perfect day, July 1997, when Monet might have brought this hue of blue into the world, that I was present to the polar ice cap breaking up.
A new hue of blue.
I can't believe that that collaboration that coincidentally happened with this painting and having written that poem.
And with the iceberg.
And with the iceberg, that's right. And, okay.